Okay, so part 4, contest kisses and chemicals. Wow. In high school, I wasn't much of a ladies' man, probably because I looked like everybody's little brother. But one girl saw something in me after I turned 16. I thought she was cool too because she was a full-on weird punk rock skate Betty. Her name was Lauren. Hi, Lauren. And Lauren actually hit me up on Facebook the other day to remind me that I actually called her a full-on weird punk rock skate Betty, and now she's a full-on weird punk rock skate middle-aged mom. So yeah, there's that. Anyway, we went on a mall date. We went window shopping, ate pizza, and went to see the first re-release of Star Wars. I knew she was shy, so she knew I was shy, so she messed with me by getting really close to my face, almost taunting me to kiss her. Inside the dark theater, it happened, completely by accident. I was probably mouthing the script, which I knew by heart. Help me, Obi-Wan Kenobi, you're our only hope. When I thought Lauren said something and I turned to say what, and she turned at the same time, and we locked jaws and ended up making out the whole movie. I think I walked out holding her hand. I had a sore tongue and I was thinking, so that's what making out is all about. That spring, God, that was really weird. Odd thing to read out loud. That spring, I caught wind of a skate contest in Rhode Island, run by some guy named Peter Pan. Peter Pan used to own, he's like a legendary East Coast surf dude. At any rate, I convinced my parents to let me drive down with the skaters from Doherty High School. That would be Mike Rafferty, Mike McDonald, I think Mike McDonald was there, maybe Eric Dara, Tom Sjogren. Yeah, those are my homies. They all lived right over the border in Worcester. I convinced my parents to let me drive down with the skaters from Doherty High School I'd been hanging out with. It was a super skate expedition as far as I was concerned, but they were less than thrilled. Rhode Island, are you kidding me? It was like going to another country. My pals Tom and Mike Rafferty, and I got to the spot in Providence and found a parking lot with a street course set up, but not the kind of street course you see in today's Summer X Games. There was a rudimentary collection of street obstacles that included a curb, a small jump ramp, a tire, a bigger jump ramp, plenty to stoke everyone out there. Kids were doing nutty crap, like huge judo airs, cranking methods, and we got a big dose of, okay, so this is what skateboarders besides us are into. We were such a small town scene, we weren't really exposed to much live action stuff outside of the skating we witnessed in the occasional Powell video. I signed up in the 15 to 18-year-old advanced non-sponsored category. The launch ramp era of skating was in full swing, and I couldn't compete with the airs, but I was good at street plants, ho-hos, all that crap. A ho-ho is when you do a street plant, put both hands on the ground, and then reach up, grab eggplant, and come back in. I could start eggplant and do all kinds of things like walk on my hands and funny stuff like that. I could do every freaking variation of the ho-ho that ever existed. I did some meager jumps off the launch ramps and then held my breath and put on my street plant show. Just as my routine was ending, I had Tom and Raph run out of the crowd and lie side by side on the ground, and I ollied over them and the crowd went nuts. All 8 people. Winning my division earned me a skate deck, a pair of Life's a Beach shorts, and a hat. The deck was a Vision Gator, and I was bummed because even though I thought Mark Gator Rogowski was a ripper from Southern California, I hated Vision. It was kind of nerdy, which is funny because I eventually ended up getting sponsored by them, and Gator eventually went on to murder someone. But there's more about that later, actually. There's tons of intrigue and craziness in this book. Senior year, 1986-1987, would probably be considered the dark era of vert skating in Paxton. Only one problem. Vert skating never truly came into the light. It was always in the shadows, just on the fringe. All the ramps had been torn down except for Mike Lambert's. I think Eamon's ramp was still up though. And his was in sorry shape. He'd gotten vert rampitis, a commonplace disease that is caught when people build ramps in their backyards. They start out super stoked, skating it all the time, but as the infection spreads, the skating stoke disappears, and before they know it, they have no desire to skateboard at all anymore. The only real treatment for this terrible disease is to remove the tumor, i.e. the ramp, a procedure that is usually performed by a parent. Rehabilitation, if any desire to skate even the remains, consists of skating other people's ramps in small doses, or in severe cases, experimenting with street skating, though this can lead to chronic launch ramp syndrome. Transporting a launch ramp to my house proved nearly fatal when a friend I'll call John Smith, actually his name was Mike Reining, and he's he's a doctor now, helped me move the ramp from his house to mine. We decided to do it one day without recruiting our parents or any mechanized transport. Thus, we negotiated the hill that I spoke about previously, using spare skateboards for wheels to carry the substantial weight and girth of this 4 foot high, actually I think it was like a 6 foot high, 8 foot wide beast. We dragged it from his driveway and muscled it on 2 skateboards, one end on the other, and then for the sake of speed, we opted to skate alongside it instead of walking. Big mistake. Midway down the hill, it was too late to undo our fatal error. Objects in motion will stay in motion until perhaps a parked car stops said object. After a quick inspection of the vehicle, it had a few dents in it already, and confirmation that nobody had seen us, we lifted the ramp back onto the 2 skateboards with incredible Hulk strength and vacated the scene of my first hit and run. A half hour later, the ramp was safely delivered to my driveway. And that's my senior picture in high school. I have an Independent Trucks t-shirt on. I look hard right there too. Super hard. After weeks of repetitive launching off the ramp and multiple rolled ankles upon landing, I yearned for a vert ramp. My body had almost forgotten how it felt to truly bludgeon itself against a rock-hard surface. Word on the street was that the town of Canton, a little bit outside of Boston, had the best ramp in Massachusetts. There was a problem, considering it was pretty far away, and I'd been having some recent parental parole violations in regards to driving outside of the county. I think some of the kids who drove me were actually afraid to get caught by my parents simply because my dad's temper was kind of legendary. My old pal Jay, however, was immune to any and all forms of punishment, and tongue lashings by parents were par for the course as far as he was concerned. He lived life for the moment and was more than happy to ditch school for the most insignificant of reasons. He was the perfect partner in crime because, honestly, I felt safe with him. My dad had always told me that the Boston area was sketchy and dangerous. As, big city kid growing up in the country, of course his parents are going to tell him the big city is dangerous. But this is before crime. Before there was really any crime ever. Anyway, all my skating pals had always told me that Boston area skaters were the best on the East Coast, which was true. When we finally got directions to the Canton ramp in October, it was colonized by East Coast heavies. Like the scene at Twista's ramp ×2, with photographers taking pictures and all kinds of crazy things going on, fast girls smoking cigs in the sidelines. The ramp itself was ridiculous. I think it was 20 feet wide, big decks, perfect transitions. For a baseball kid, it probably would have been the equivalent of playing in a perfectly groomed stadium after years of playing sandlot ball. I weaseled my way into as many runs on the ramp as I could manage without getting run over. I was stoked because I was skating pretty well and getting compliments from all the heavies. They probably thought that I was 12. On the ride home, Jay's car died in Framingham, about 45 minutes from my house. The car was hopeless, and I had to call my parents, who came and picked us up at 10 that night at a gas station. I got in a shitload of trouble for driving to Canton without permission, but I still didn't learn my lesson. A few weeks later, I was off on another seek and skate mission to another ramp in Chelmsford, Massachusetts, which was even further away in Canton. That Saturday, some of the other kids and I piled into the back of a pickup truck owned by a kid named Abom. Abom used to live in the center of my town. He actually lived across from Tom Putnam. And Chris Robinson was his name. I don't know why they called him Abom. It was late November, and by the time we got to the ramp, an hour and a half later, I was frozen stiff and couldn't feel my feet. All the big names were there, including Fred Smith and this one guy named Mark Conahan, nicknamed Max Concave. He was doing a lot of artwork for Thrasher. Max was doing big airs to Axel, and it was so cold out that the plastic copers on his tracker trucks shattered when he hit the coping. I remember this very, very vividly because Mark Conahan I think he did the artwork for the very first issue of Thrasher on the cover, and he did the sickest frontside inverts. Like, this is before, I'd never seen anyone do a frontside invert in person, and Mark Conahan did sick ones. And he currently lives in Portland, I think. Yeah. So, anyway. He was gnarly. I jumped around to get the blood flowing and skated a heated snake session. which is when skaters drop into the ramp the instant a person skating falls, or if they haven't fallen, if they're going to be anticipated to fall, or if they just want to go, pretty much. There is no lineup or orderly method, so everyone gets a turn. It's a free-for-all in Wild West terms. You're either quick or you're dead. I couldn't get a run in. I'd set my board down and people would just snake me. Meanwhile, okay, just to lay of the land here, it was like November, it was freezing out. It was like, we got there super, super late during that day. It was supposed to snow. It had been flurrying all day, and I drove in the back of a pickup truck from Worcester all the way down to Chelmsford. I couldn't feel my feet, like straight up couldn't feel my feet. My feet were frozen. I finally got about 4 runs in after everyone else was packing it in because it was too dark to see. Those runs were enough for me to be completely soaked with sweat, and then it started snowing. It started puking snow. We climbed back into the back of A-Bomb's truck for the drive home. It was dark and icy, so we had to drive slow, and my parents thought I'd been skating in Paxton, which was impossible since a major snowstorm had covered Paxton under a foot of snow earlier that day. The hour-and-a-half drive turned into a 3-hour drive. I was seriously thinking I'm dead. Not from my parents, although they expected me home 5 hours earlier, but because I was hypothermic, huddled with the other skate rats like mice in a burrow. We were all wet with sweat and only wearing shorts and t-shirts, and they were all wet. The lucky ones had sweatshirts on too. When we pulled up to my house around 9 p.m., I could barely climb out of the truck. I had blue lips, a gray nose, and I was frozen solid. I still tried to commando in the front door, but my parents ambushed me with both barrels. "Where in the frickin' hell have you been?" said my dad. My mom was so worried she was nearly in tears and could only manage, "You didn't call?" This before cell phones, by the way. Though the whole situation sucked, it was really, really fun to discover this new ramp, and I hadn't lost any fingers and toes. Without knowing it, my parents were teaching me valuable life skills, weighing out positives versus negatives and living with the consequences. I was grounded for about a month. Totally acceptable repercussions. When winter snows turned everything white my senior year, depression set in as black as ever. In addition to chipping the ice off ramps and lighting them on fire, would spend hours sweeping a parking lot just to street skate, which was catching on more and more at this point. I never understood why we'd get kicked out. I thought we were performing a public service, sweeping and shoveling sidewalks and parking lots. We're always polite, and we kept our skateboards away from pedestrians, no different than kids at the park tossing around a football or a frisbee. Despite the grounding, my mom and dad didn't mind me accompanying them on their ski trips. They even bought me a new snowboard, another Swallowtail, a Sims 1500 FE Pro with high back bindings. This board was a huge step up from the Flight, and I hunted down little jumps all over the mountain. Every snowboarder on the hill sucked, but I sucked just a little bit less. I started dating this girl named Michelle that winter. Michelle LaChance. Hi, Michelle. She was the first popular girl I met who saw something in me, and because she seemed normal, my parents didn't mind me seeing her while I was grounded. Girls had not really been a priority in my life, but I'd be lying if I didn't admit that Michelle was my first love. I was pretty serious with her. There's our senior prom photo. Heavy. She would show up at the ramp and have fun faking around. Actually, she used to skate a whole bunch. She one time got a splinter about this long through her shoe, through her toe, and out the top of her shoe, like bottom of the shoe, because remember these ramps had no masonite, it was just plywood, and you would layer the ramp with vertical ply, so you were going with the grain, so when it splintered, the splinters would be really big and pokey. She'd show up at a ramp and have fun faking around. I respected her for that, because most girls at ramps were just lurkers or girlfriends, and they seldom actually skateboarded. Michelle also had a car, bonus, and she drove me everywhere. Out of nowhere, one of my friends, Mike Eamon, built a perfect ramp in Holden. This development was not only good for my already downward spiraling attendance record at school. This development was not good for my already downward spiraling attendance record at school. For me, school was a nuisance. But what I needed was to practice so I could learn all the tricks on the Bones Brigade video show and the newer video, Future Primitive by Powell. I got in the habit of picking a trick or two for the day and just going over that over and over and over again until I could practically do it with my eyes closed. My drive was insane. If I started trying a trick in the morning, I wouldn't leave the ramp until I nailed it. If the vert trick started to get boring, I'd switch things up, find a street spot in Worcester and camp out all day. I had no problem being alone because my mind was constantly occupied. It was me versus the trick, and it pissed me off to no end if a trick got the best of me. It never occurred to me that it wasn't me versus the trick, it was me versus myself. This self-competition made me feel alive, and I'd never been this passionate about anything in my life except for maybe candy. So Mike Eamon's ramp was the first 10-foot transition ramp on the East Coast, and the sessions at Eamon's ramp were like super heavy there too. Like a lot of big time people would come, like East Coast skate pros would come from New Jersey and stuff like that, because he truly had like the best freaking ramp on the East Coast. And so like Fred Smith would be there on like a Tuesday afternoon, and Jeff Thompson and Jim Noonan and Metal Man and Johnny Carwash. Just there's so many heavies that used to show up there. So we got treated to some really, really good skating at a young age, some like pretty inspiring stuff. Like Fred was Fred was like the first East Coast or New England pro with like a legitimate model on Alba. So anytime Freddie showed up, it was so sick, and he was like the most stylish dude ever. He had tattoos before tattoos were cool, like before your grandmother had tattoos, and he had dreadlocks before dreadlocks on a white guy became like Rasta pasta. So anyway, end of my senior year, my dad went to the dealership to trade in his truck for a new one. He came home and said, "I found you a nice Chevette today, Todd." And I was all shits and giggles. I got a shiny red Chevy Chevette. I said, "Are you kidding me? A car?" So I drove with him to the lot, and booyah, there it was. I was still dating Michelle, who had driven me everywhere up until this point, and I was dying to pick her up on my own wheels. But first I had to customize the vehicle. Ever since I saw Thrashing, I'd been saving stickers for years in anticipation of making my car look like the one in the movie. Within 10 minutes of getting my Chevette, I had stickered the shit out of the entire back end, and my dad brought my mom out to show off his purchase, and he lost his marbles. He gave me the usual, "God damn it, and you have no respect for your belongings, blah, blah, blah." But my mom cut in with her sweet, soft voice and said, "It's his car, he can do what he wants with it." So my dad grumbled something or other and went back inside to watch the Stanley Cup Finals. A few months later, after I got my wheels, my folks loosened the parental wrench and accepted the fact that I was going to occasionally leave the city limits. I had begun to collect a posse of younger skaters who were totally into skateboarding, so I was the one who drove to the Canton ramp after school. I would drive an hour from Worcester, probably a little bit more than an hour, every single day at 2:30. In the spring of my senior year, I would drive from Worcester to Canton every single day. Like I would skate the Canton ramp every single day till dark and then drive home. It was the glory days. The kids pitched in change for gas. One day we rolled up with no fewer than 5 kids packed into the Chevette, and this guy, Kevin Day, what's up Kevin? Legendary Boston skater. One of the better skaters at the time said, "There's Todd and his squad." That mutated into Todd Squad and then turned into Squad. And that became my nickname around town with the older skaters, with Squad. I thought it was a pretty cool nickname. I drew my own Squad logo on my skateboard in the old Thrasher Skate and Destroy style lettering. Thank you, Stesic. My new squad of skate friends were into street skating too, so we balanced out our time between the vert ramps, launch ramps, and any piece of concrete we could find around the county. O'Neill's bike shop in Worcester was one of the better skate shops around, and they had no problem letting skaters loiter in and around the parking lot. The store advertised an up-and-coming street contest, as all local skate contests were street at that point, not really vert, in which the winner would become the star of the O'Neill's next local television commercial. During that contest, I unveiled my Mute 360s I'd been practicing, and I won a pretty rad prize package. I got a deck, a pair of custom Vans that literally showed up 5 months later, some pads, some stickers, t-shirt, and a spot on the O'Neill team, which was like a 10% discount for any product at the shop. My mom and dad were stoked. They told all their Rotary friends to watch for me on television. So the commercial was, I ended up doing a ho-ho in the grass in Worcester for this commercial. It was pretty pathetic. You couldn't even see a street around. The scene was so stupid and so fast. It was like 0.99 seconds of fame. If you blinked, you missed me. But I was a pretty big deal. I was kind of stoked on that. At the end of my senior year, Michelle and I went to prom together, which made my mom really proud. This hint of normalcy lasted about 24 hours, and then I barfed all over the car that night and spent the next morning scrubbing down the interior to get rid of the smell. I think that was actually I did barf all over the back of the Chevette, but I think that was for the night after my graduation at some party, because I think I drank like almost a 2-liter bottle of Sun Country wine coolers by myself. First and last time that ever happened. I got a scholarship, question mark. When I was 15, one of my teachers told my mom that I was really smart because I did just enough in school to pass my classes. Nothing more, nothing less. I followed through with this strategy until graduation in 1987. School was something I dealt with to keep my parents off my back. I always did well in my English and my art classes. Outside of that, I've always had a knack for retaining totally useless information like Star Wars trivia, Godzilla movies, and Thrasher magazine covers and skaters and tricks. If I was interested in something, I had a photographic memory. My brain is a useless trap for pop culture trivia, too. The day of my graduation ceremony at the high school gymnasium, I went to find my name on the seating chart. My name wasn't in the section with the rest of the R's, and I kind of freaked out. Considering my absences, there was a distinct possibility that I wasn't going to graduate. I scoured the list and finally found my name in a section up front, so I immediately thought that I was sitting with like the short bus kids or something. That's such a derogatory term these days. Let's just put not so bright kids. Having no choice, I sauntered up to the front and sat down with a bunch of people I didn't know, figuring this must be a mistake. The ceremony began with the principal calling off the names of kids that had received a scholarship, which oddly enough were the people in my section. Definitely a mistake, I thought, and I slouched in my chair. Brant Todd Richards, the principal called out, Graphic Arts Scholarship, New Hampshire Vocational Technical College. I stood up tentatively and shook the hands of the principal, who looked almost as shocked as I felt. Apparently, my parents had gathered up my transcripts, swiped some of my artwork samples, and applied for the school and the scholarship months earlier. They said that they had told me about the scholarship before the ceremony, but I had no recollection of that. At this point in my life, I brushed off anything my parents told me as unimportant. Sometimes I just ignored them. I wasn't trying to be a jerk to them. I was just in my own little world. And next chapter, the ride not taken. Look at this. Double-handed ho-ho. That's at Tenny Mountain. And the first half pipe was ever on the East Coast. How far are we going to go here? What we got? Okay, we got another chapter. I feel like 10 minutes. Before I headed off to college in 1987, my girlfriend Michelle called and gave me the classic, maybe we should see other people. I was so wrapped up in skating at the time that it didn't even faze me. I said, okay, and that was the last I heard from her. In August, I packed up the Chevette and followed my parents the 2 hours to Laconia, New Hampshire. My mom and dad found out that a kid who graduated with me named Dave LaRue was going to go to the same school. So they and Dave's parents found us an apartment, stocked the fridge, and got us settled. They left me with an ATM card, an ever-abused emergency credit card, and a reminder, have fun, but don't forget that you're here to get an education. They left. I was 17, a respectable height of 5'9", and on my own. Dave and I were from the same town, but that was the only thing we had in common. He was a jock, and I was a skater. We became friends, but we definitely were an odd couple. I'd go and skate, and he'd go play hockey. I was still kind of punk rock, but I'd scaled it down for college. Basically, I'd grown a dreadlock mullet, and believe it or not, mullets were totally acceptable back then, and I had like 4 big moldy locks and long hair hanging down my neck. They weren't like that big, but I definitely didn't brush my hair. Classes started, and it took about 3 days for me to realize that I had nothing in common with any of these students. Everyone seemed like they were stereotypical East Coast prep kids, khaki pants, sweaters, collared Oxford shirts were the norm. Everyone was nice, but there was a general lack of individuality. And rather than stand out, I tended to try to blend myself in. I couldn't find a single skater or snowboarder to slap me out of my funk and help me maintain my dignity. It was unsettling, and I was bummed. But what disturbed me the most about college was that everyone seemed to be there to get an education. Then one day, after a couple of depressing weeks of class, I drove around Laconia to find something fun to skate by myself, and I saw a couple skateboarders sessioning in a parking lot. They were high school sophomores, Scott and Peter. So that's Scott Fortin and Peter Fernay. And yeah. I showed off a little bit with my skateboarding circus act. I walked around on my hands and shit, and they seemed impressed. I dropped Scott off at his house in a nearby neighborhood and said we should meet there the next day because all the Laconia skate kids would be there. Scott had a launch ramp. Finding some of my own kind put me in a better mood, and I went back to my apartment and actually studied that night. No, wait, I didn't, but I did think about it. I went back the next day and found Scott, Peter, and another high school sophomore named Joel Muzzy dorking around in the driveway. Joel and I hit it off, and from that day forward, I'd pick him up and his little crew of skaters after school and would go skate. Joel had a naturally quick wit. and he noticed that the way I wrote squat on my skateboard looked like Pinos when it was read upside down. So now whenever I fell or did something stupid, he'd give me shit and call me Pinos. Actually, they all called me Pinos. It's pretty funny. Mutual degradation was a key ingredient for our friendship. I can't emphasize how important meeting Muzzy and those kids was for me. I was excited about being away from home and living on my own, but I'd also been bored because I wasn't really into partying and sucking down beer bongs. Connecting with the local skate rats who knew the skate spots around town was the saving grace of my college years. We kept our ears open for new spots, and then one day Joel heard a rumor from some derelict about an insane ramp at a mansion on the Connecticut coast, Steve Mish's ramp. This was the mansion ramp, and it had I think there was a contest there. There was a couple pictures of it in Thrasher. It's pretty rad to go there to figure it out. We devoted a weekend in October to locating what became known as the mansion ramp, and when we did find it, we were stunned. To the side of this hotel-sized house was a perfect half-pipe on a big green lawn with a kid skating it all by himself. It was surreal. This surreal scene, the ocean breeze blowing in, because it was right on, like, in Connecticut, it was right on, like, one of the canals. Or, yeah, there was, like, it was, I forget where it was. Was it in Bristol? I forget where it was, but maybe it was in Groton, because there was like submarines. There was like a submarine base there or something. I just remember like submarines and military boats going in and out. Ocean breeze was blowing in, and Jimi Hendrix was blasting on an insane outdoor sound system. At the time, we scoffed at anything that wasn't punk rock, but looking back, I realized this kid was on his shit. Steve Misch, this kid was so good. He welcomed us to his ramp, and at the end of a long day, we still couldn't believe that we'd actually experienced something that cool. That kid did such good fast plants. He was so good, super good. You could tell, like, and it was like a big transition ramp. It was another like 10-foot tranny ramp with like 2 feet of vert, and Steve Misch was a ruler. The next road trip was spurred on by talk that the University of Vermont had a vert ramp on its campus. UVM used to have a vert ramp in a big field. Fun fact. I took the skate rats 4 hours away to Burlington to check it out. The drive was long and we were jonesing to skate, but when we found the ramp, it was chained up, i.e. closed for the weekend. Just as we were super bummed and were about to turn around and drive back, another pair of skate rats rolled up. One of the younger kids, a 14-year-old kid named Jeff Brushy, invited us to session his backyard ramp. He had a vert ramp in his backyard too. So we followed him and his friends, Chris Swires, Josh Brownlee, to Heinsberg, Vermont, a half an hour away. Heinsberg! It was one of those chance meetings that makes skateboarding such a rad thing to do. The ramp was fun, and they were all really good skaters. There were no bad vibes, just an instant camaraderie based on nothing more than a common interest. The only competitive energy was with yourself and trying to skate clean for a new audience. On the flip side, we're always looking to learn new tricks, and the best way to stay on top of that, outside of the magazines, was to travel, to hit contests, and keep your mind and eyes open. I called my friend from Paxton, Rob Levine, who was going to college in Burlington that night, about hooking up with these guys. He knew Brushy and his friends as the Boarding House crew. The Boarding House was a snowboard/skate shop owned by world champion Burton team rider Andy Coughlin, whose name I recognized from International Snowboard Magazine, the first and only snowboard magazine I'd ever seen, which wasn't surprising since it pretty much was impossible to find. Joel Muzzy and the boys were pretty much my link to staying up to date with skateboarding while I was in college. Vert and pool skating and ramp skating, they were really popular at the time, so the vert contests always attracted the best skaters. And this I don't think this isn't real, but anyways, Joel asked me about my best contest results, and he thought I was full of it when I admitted I'd never entered a vert contest. I don't think I ever did do a vert contest though. I'd done well in 2 street contests, so I figured why not. Finding one to enter became my next goal, and Joel and the boys were a super supportive crew, and I think they wanted to see me take skateboarding to the next level. They used to call me Marathon Man because I would drop in on the ramp and go forever without falling. But their confidence might have wavered a bit when they saw me faced with my first real vert competition at CT Bike Exchange in Bristol, Connecticut. I was so nervous, I felt like I would bark my brains out before my run. I also tended to sweat a lot, like a lot. Muzzy took some photos of me while I warmed up in hopes of sending these shots to a magazine. I think that was Pete, wasn't Muzzy. But there was a big sweat ring around my butthole, and that ruined every good shot. No, it just made the shots better. I have butt sweat, man. Still have butt sweat. The more nervous I got, the more I sweated. When I stood up on the deck in front of the substantial crowd and prepared to drop in, my legs began shaking uncontrollably. I could feel the ass sweat dripping down my legs, and it was like someone turned on a faucet under my armpits. My feet and my legs went tingly and numb, like they weren't even mine. I couldn't even feel them. I dropped in and sketched out on the flat bottom, and that was that. Game over, no second chance. My reaction surprised me because I'd always been pretty calm and collected during street comps, but something about being on a big ramp in front of everyone turned my stomach. I was also really intimidated because there were tons of really good skaters there. Muzzy and the crew didn't say anything, but they knew I'd choked and bad. After the contest, I replayed that bail a zillion times in my head and tried to dissect why I messed up. That's when I realized why I'd always practiced so damn much. I had a serious complex. No matter how well I did, I always thought I sucked. So I'd run myself into the ground practicing. Up there on the ramp, I started thinking about sucking, and then I panicked and I fell. It was something I had to work on. I wanted to redeem myself so I would feel better. All right, so that's it. But check this shot out. Wait, I think there's a shot of Muzzy. So here's a couple shots of Muzzy. There's Muzzy at the Guilford High School doing a street plant. And there's Muzzy. I think that was in Providence, Rhode Island, at this indoor ramp in Providence. It's good, kind of like a maxi mini ramp. It was really, really fun. I learned nose picks on that extension right there. Pretty stoked on that. Indie nose picks. Anyway, all right. Next chapter, Skate Rats Unite. We'll see you tomorrow.